When Grandpa faked cancer, they rushed to divide his wealth. Mom said, "Let him die." But what happened next shook us all. "Let him die." Those were the chilling words I heard my own mother utter when I begged her to help Grandpa Charlie. They had just heard he had cancer, or so they thought. Within hours, they began dividing his estate like vultures circling roadkill. There was no mourning, no compassion, just greed wrapped in fake concern. But Grandpa wasn't dying. He was watching. He was testing us. And when he walked in, strong, alive, and very much aware, their masks didn't just slip, they shattered completely. What followed wasn't just a revelation. It was a reckoning that would tear our family apart forever. The Morrison family looked like something straight out of Southern Living magazine. Elegant, wealthy, picture perfect. But perfection is often just a beautifully polished lie, and our lie was about to crumble. Charles Morrison, Grandpa Charlie to me, was a decorated Vietnam veteran and a self-made man who built a small trucking business into a nationwide transportation empire. He raised 3 children in our sprawling estate in Savannah, my mother Victoria, Uncle Benjamin, and Aunt Rebecca. Each one was entitled in their own special way. Grandpa's wife, my beloved Grandma Rose, passed away 10 years ago from a heart attack. After that funeral, everything in our family began to rot from the inside out. My mother Victoria married a hedge fund manager and developed quite the taste for champagne brunches and social manipulation. She could smile sweetly while stabbing you in the back, and she'd perfected this art over decades of country club politics. Uncle Benjamin was a corporate lawyer who never missed a family gathering, especially when inheritance or wealth redistribution came up in conversation. He had this way of making legal threats sound like friendly advice. Aunt Rebecca was our family's free spirit, bouncing from boyfriend to boyfriend, art gallery to art gallery, always broke and always demanding money from Grandpa. She painted herself as the creative soul, but really, she was just another leech with better PR. And then there was me, Ellie, Victoria's only daughter. While my cousins were raised by nannies and boarding schools, I was practically raised by Grandpa Charlie himself. I didn't wear Louboutin heels or attend debutante balls, but I sat on the porch swing listening to his war stories, his deep belly laughs, and yes, even his quiet regrets about our family. We were close, closer than anyone else in the Morrison clan understood or bothered to appreciate. He taught me to drive stick shift in his old Chevy pickup. We'd spend Sunday mornings fishing at Lake Hartwell, talking about everything and nothing. He was more of a parent to me than my actual parents ever were. That's why when the call came on that grey Thursday morning in October, my entire world shifted on its axis. And what I discovered next would change everything I thought I knew about the people I called family. I remember everything about that morning with crystal clarity. The autumn rain was pattering against my apartment window in Atlanta, and I was nursing my second cup of coffee, preparing for another mundane day at the marketing firm where I worked. Then my phone rang. Grandpa Charlie's name lit up the screen. "Ellie, sweetheart." His voice was softer than usual, almost fragile. "I need to tell you something before you hear it from anyone else." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong, Grandpa?" "Well, honey, I went to see Dr. Patterson yesterday for that persistent cough I've been having." He paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. "They found something on the X-ray. A shadow on my lungs. They think it might be cancer." The coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering against my hardwood floor. "What? Are you sure? Did they run more tests?" "Not yet, darling. But Dr. Patterson seemed pretty concerned. Said we'd know more after the biopsy next week." His voice cracked slightly. "I just wanted you to hear it from me first, in case." "Don't you dare finish that sentence," I said, already grabbing my keys and purse. "I'm coming over right now." "You don't have to. I'm already halfway out the door." I drove through that October downpour like a woman possessed, taking the 2-hour trip from Atlanta to Savannah in record time. I stopped at Whole Foods and grabbed everything I could think of: homemade chicken soup from the deli, soft dinner rolls, chamomile tea, and the warmest blanket I could find. But when I pulled up to Grandpa's Antabella mansion on Bull Street, I knew something was wrong. The circular driveway was packed with cars I recognized all too well: Mother's white BMW, Uncle Benjamin's black Mercedes, and Aunt Rebecca's beat-up Honda Civic that she drove ironically, claiming it was bohemian chic. I used my key to let myself in, expecting to find them comforting Grandpa, maybe sitting around his bedside. Instead, I found them huddled around the massive mahogany dining room table like generals planning a military campaign. The table was covered with legal documents, calculators, and what looked suspiciously like real estate listings. "Oh good, you're here," Mother said without looking up from a spreadsheet. She was wearing her pearl necklace, the one she only wore for important occasions. "We were just discussing what would be best for Daddy financially, given his situation." Uncle Benjamin adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and tapped his Mont Blanc pen against a legal pad. "The estate planning really can't wait, Ellie. We need to be practical about this." Aunt Rebecca was scrolling through her phone, probably looking at property values. "I've already called a few auction houses about the art collection. We should get appraisals done quickly." I stood there holding my bag of comfort items, feeling like I'd walked into the wrong movie. "Where's Grandpa?" "Resting upstairs," Mother said dismissively. "He's pretty weak. We're handling the important stuff." The important stuff. 3 hours after learning their father might have cancer, and they were already carving up his legacy like a Thanksgiving turkey. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong with my family. That evening, I found Grandpa Charlie in his favorite leather recliner in the study, a heavy quilt pulled up to his chin. He looked smaller somehow, more fragile than I'd ever seen him. But when our eyes met, there was something there, a spark that didn't match his supposedly weakened condition. "Come here, sweetheart," he whispered, patting the ottoman beside his chair. I sat down and took his weathered hand in mine. It was warm and steady, not at all like the hand of a dying man. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry about the diagnosis. But we're going to fight this together, okay? Whatever you need." He squeezed my hand and glanced toward the study door. Then, moving with surprising agility for someone who was supposedly at death's door, he stood up and quietly turned the lock. "Ellie," he said, his voice suddenly clear and strong. "There is no cancer." I blinked hard, sure I'd misheard him. "What?" I lied. "It was necessary." He walked to his antique roll-top desk and pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind private investigators use. I needed to see what they would do. I needed proof of who they really are underneath all those Sunday dinner smiles. My mouth fell open. You faked having cancer." "Dr. Patterson is an old army buddy of mine. He agreed to help with this little experiment." Grandpa's eyes were bright with purpose now, all traces of frailty gone. "Ellie, I've suspected for years that your mother and my other children only see me as a walking ATM. But suspecting and knowing are two different things." He held up the recorder. "This morning, while I was supposedly napping, I recorded everything they said in that dining room. Every greedy word, every callous calculation." I felt sick to my stomach. "What did they say?" "Things that would break your heart, sweetheart. Things no parent should ever hear from their own children." His jaw tightened. "But you showed up with soup and blankets and love. You didn't ask about money or wills or inheritance. You just wanted to take care of your old grandpa." I was still reeling from the revelation. "So what happens now?" Grandpa Charlie smiled, and for the first time in days, it reached his eyes. "Now we let them dig their own graves a little deeper. I want to see just how far they'll go." He sat back down and immediately resumed his frail act, his shoulders sagging and his breathing becoming labored again. "But Grandpa." "Trust me, Ellie. I've been planning this for months. There's going to be a reckoning in this family, and when it comes, I need you by my side. Can you do that for me?" Looking into his eyes, I saw the same man who taught me to fish, who helped me with my homework, who held me when I cried over my first heartbreak. If he needed me to play along with this elaborate test, then that's exactly what I would do. "What do you need me to do?" Saturday morning arrived with a crispness that made the Spanish moss sway gently in the breeze. But inside the Morrison mansion, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The grief that should have filled these halls was replaced by something much more sinister, cold, calculating greed. Uncle Benjamin arrived at 9 a.m. sharp with a professional appraiser in tow, a thin, nervous man with a clipboard who immediately began photographing Grandpa's antiques and artwork. "Just getting a baseline assessment," Benjamin explained to me when I questioned him. "For insurance purposes, you understand. Given Dad's condition, we need to protect the estate's assets." Aunt Rebecca showed up an hour later with a stack of manila folders and her laptop. She'd apparently spent the night researching property taxes and estate liquidation strategies. "I found 3 auction houses that specialize in southern antiques," she announced, spreading papers across the coffee table. We should move quickly while the market's hot. But it was my mother who truly shocked me. She walked through the house with colored sticky dots, systematically marking items like she was shopping at a garage sale. The silver tea service has always been promised to me, she said, placing a blue dot on Grandma Rose's precious heirloom. And Daddy always said the coin collection should stay in the family. A green dot went on the antique display case. I watched this obscene treasure hunt from the kitchen doorway, my stomach churning with disgust. Meanwhile, Grandpa Charlie sat in his wheelchair in the corner of the living room, wrapped in an old quilt, playing his role to perfection. Every few minutes, he'd let out a labored cough or close his eyes as if exhausted. He was like a master actor performing the role of his lifetime. The most nauseating part was how they talked about him as if he weren't even there. The lake house in Blue Ridge should definitely be sold first, Benjamin said, consulting his legal pad. The property values in North Georgia have skyrocketed. What about the beach house in Hilton Head? Rebecca asked, not bothering to lower her voice. Market's soft right now, Mother replied matter-of-factly. We should hold on to it until spring, then flip it. They were discussing dismantling his life's work like they were planning a dinner menu. That afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I approached my mother while she was photographing Grandpa's war medals for inventory purposes. Mom, don't you think we should focus on making Grandpa comfortable instead of all this? I gestured at the chaos around us. She looked at me with the patronizing smile she'd perfected during my teenage years. Oh, sweetheart, you're so naive about these things. Daddy's old, and he's sick. This is just nature taking its course. She adjusted one of the medals for a better photograph. He's had a good run, really. 82 years is nothing to complain about. The casual cruelty in her voice made my blood run cold. He's not dead yet, Mom. Well, no, but let's be realistic here. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. The doctors said it's aggressive. We need to be practical adults about this situation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until some basic human decency rattled loose. Instead, I excused myself and walked out to Grandpa's rose garden, where I promptly threw up behind the garden shed. This wasn't grief. This wasn't even acceptance. This was 3 grown adults gleefully dismantling their father's life before he was even gone. And the worst part? They thought they were being clever about it. Sunday morning brought what I can only describe as a grotesque parody of a prayer service. Aunt Rebecca had invited Pastor Williams from First Baptist to come pray over Daddy and help him find peace. But it wasn't really about spiritual comfort. It was about ceremony, about making their premature mourning look respectable to the outside world. They dressed in black like they were already attending his funeral. Mother wore her somber Chanel suit and her most serious pearl earrings. Uncle Benjamin looked like he was heading to court in his dark navy pinstripe. Even Rebecca had traded her usual flowing scarves for conservative black dress. Pastor Williams, bless his heart, seemed genuinely concerned about Grandpa's spiritual welfare. But my family treated his visit like a dress rehearsal for the main event. We just want to make sure Daddy's ready, Rebecca whispered to the pastor, dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Closure is so important for everyone involved. They gathered around Grandpa's wheelchair in the living room while Pastor Williams read from Psalms. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. They didn't include Grandpa in the prayer circle. They literally formed a circle around him, talking about him in the third person while he sat there supposedly too weak to participate. Lord, we ask that you prepare Charles for his journey home, Pastor Williams intoned solemnly. Yes, Lord, my family murmured in unison, their heads bowed in fake reverence. Meanwhile, Grandpa sat there playing his part, occasionally nodding weakly or squeezing my hand when I reached for his. But I could see the fire burning behind his eyes, and I knew this charade was eating him alive. After the prayer service, Uncle Benjamin took it upon himself to become the unofficial executor of an estate that wasn't even available yet. I've been thinking, he announced over coffee and Danish pastries in the dining room. We should move quickly on liquidating the properties. The real estate market won't stay hot forever. How quickly? Mother asked, pulling out her phone to take notes. I'd say we list everything within the month. Maybe sooner if Dad takes a turn for the worse. Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. I've already talked to Christie's about the art collection. They're very interested in the Civil War pieces. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've already contacted auction houses. Well, someone has to be the adult here, Benjamin said condescendingly. These decisions don't make themselves, Ellie. That's when Mother said the words that broke something inside me. Look, honey, I know this is hard for you. You and Grandpa have always been close. She reached over and patted my hand like I was a child. But sometimes the kindest thing we can do is just let nature take its course. He's tired, Ellie. Maybe it's time to let him go. Let him go. Like he was a balloon at a county fair. Are you seriously suggesting we just give up on him? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I'm suggesting we be realistic, she replied smoothly. He's 82 years old with terminal cancer. Fighting this will just prolong his suffering and drain the estate with medical bills. Uncle Benjamin nodded sagely. Medical bankruptcies destroy families, Ellie. Daddy wouldn't want that. I looked around the table at these three people who shared my DNA, and I realized I was looking at strangers. Worse than strangers, I was looking at predators. That night, I sat beside Grandpa's bed, tears streaming down my face. They've already buried you, I whispered to him. In their minds, you're already gone. He squeezed my hand. That's exactly the point, sweetheart. Now I know who they really are when they think nobody's watching. But I could see the pain in his eyes, and I knew this test was costing him more than he'd bargained for. Monday evening arrived like the calm before a hurricane. Grandpa Charlie asked me to set the dining room table with Grandma Rose's finest china, the spode Christmas pattern that only came out for the most special occasions. I want one last family dinner, he told me, his voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. Call everyone. Tell them it's urgent. Tell them I have something important to discuss. I polished the crystal glasses until they sparkled under the chandelier. I arranged the good silver exactly the way Grandma Rose had taught me years ago. The table looked like something from Southern Living magazine, elegant and inviting and completely at odds with what was about to happen. I'd spent the day cooking all of Grandpa's favorites, herb-crusted prime rib, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and cornbread from Grandma's recipe. The house smelled like Sunday dinners from my childhood, warm and comforting and full of love. They arrived promptly at 6 o'clock, dressed in their usual dark colors and wearing expressions of forced concern. I'm sure they thought Grandpa was planning to make some final pronouncements about his will, maybe hand out some last-minute gifts. I hope he's strong enough for this, Rebecca murmured as she hung up her coat. He looks worse today, Benjamin observed, glancing toward the dining room where Grandpa sat at the head of the table. Mother just nodded grimly, probably already calculating how to divide whatever announcements were coming. We took our seats around the table, the scene looking for all the world like a normal family gathering. Grandpa sat in his usual spot, looking frail and diminished in his wheelchair. I served the meal, playing the dutiful granddaughter, while they made small talk about the weather and local gossip. But I could feel the electricity in the air. This wasn't going to be a normal dinner. After everyone had filled their plates, Grandpa Charlie slowly reached into his jacket pocket. His movements were deliberate, theatrical even. He pulled out the small digital recorder and placed it carefully on the table next to his water glass. Before we eat, he said, his voice suddenly clear and strong, I have something I need to share with all of you. The change in his voice was so dramatic that everyone froze mid-bite. Mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Benjamin set down his wine glass with a sharp clink. Grandpa pressed play. The room filled with their own voices from Saturday morning. The lake house should definitely be sold first. What about the beach house in Hilton Head? He's had a good run, really. 82 years is nothing to complain about. Maybe it's time to let him go. The color drained from their faces as they listened to themselves dissecting his life like vultures over roadkill. Rebecca's hand flew to her throat. Benjamin's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But the worst moment came when Mother's voice filled the room, clear as day, let him die. The recording ended, and the silence that followed was deafening. Then Grandpa Charlie stood up. Not slowly, not with the labored movements of a dying man, but with the confident posture of someone who just won the most important battle of his life. I am not dying, he announced, his voice ringing through the dining room. I never was. The explosion that followed was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed in our supposedly refined Southern family. Rebecca shot to her feet so fast her chair toppled backward. This is insane. You can't just manipulate people like this. Benjamin was jabbing his finger across the table. This is entrapment. Nothing we said would hold up in court. But Mother just sat there in stunned silence, her face cycling through shock, rage, and something that might have been shame if she were capable of feeling it. Grandpa Charlie remained standing, every inch the commanding presence he'd always been. "You were tested," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd led soldiers through hell and built an empire from nothing. "Every single one of you failed." He turned to look at me, and his expression softened. "Except Ellie. When she thought I was dying, she brought soup and comfort and love. She never once asked about money or inheritance. She just wanted to take care of her old grandpa." From his other jacket pocket, he produced a sealed envelope. "This is my new will. It was notarized this morning by Judge Harrison himself." The room went deadly quiet. "Every asset, every investment, every property, all of it goes to Ellie." His voice was steady, final. "Not out of favoritism, but out of justice. She's the only one in this room who actually loves me more than my money." That's when all hell broke loose. Rebecca started screaming about emotional manipulation and family betrayal. Benjamin threatened lawsuits and competency hearings. Mother finally found her voice and began demanding her rightful share of the inheritance she'd never actually earned. But Grandpa Charlie had planned for this too. He'd recorded this dinner as well, capturing their ugly reactions for posterity. More importantly, he'd already transferred most of his liquid assets into an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The legal challenges came fast and furious over the next few weeks. Mother hired the most expensive lawyer in Savannah to contest the will. Benjamin tried to have Grandpa declared mentally incompetent. Rebecca sent alternating letters, some pleading, some threatening, all desperate. But Judge Harrison had known Grandpa for 40 years, and the will was ironclad. Dr. Patterson confirmed that the cancer scare had been a ruse, but one conducted with his medical supervision to ensure Grandpa's health was never actually at risk. The inheritance stood. Rather than gloat or revel in my newfound wealth, I focused on what Grandpa had really given me, the truth about my family, and the responsibility to use his legacy wisely. We spent his remaining years, he lived 4 more wonderful years after the Great Deception, as we came to call it, traveling to places he'd always wanted to see. We drove Route 66 in a restored 1967 Ford Mustang. We went to Normandy so he could honor his fallen brothers. We spent Christmas in New York and summers at a little cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Most importantly, we rebuilt our relationship free from the poison that had infected our family for so long. When Grandpa Charlie finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 86, I gave him the funeral he deserved, one filled with veterans, friends, and people whose lives he'd touched through his quiet generosity over the decades. My mother, uncle, and aunt attended, but they sat in the back like the strangers they'd chosen to become. After the funeral, I established the Charles Morrison Foundation, using his fortune to provide scholarships for underprivileged students and support programs for homeless veterans. His money built libraries, funded addiction treatment centers, and helped families in crisis. The 3 people who tried to profit from his supposed death? They eventually scattered like leaves in the wind. Mother remarried and moved to Florida. Benjamin faded into corporate obscurity. Rebecca opened a small gallery in Asheville, still bitter but finally distant enough to stop causing drama. But I carried Grandpa Charlie with me, not in bank statements or property deeds, but in the values he'd instilled in me and the love he'd shown when I needed it most. Because when the masks fell away and the greed was exposed, the truth stood resilient and clear. Real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in love, loyalty, and the courage to do what's right even when it costs you everything. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to test the people around you, you discover that the person you least expected, the granddaughter who just wanted to bring you soup when you were sick, is the only one who truly understands what family really means.